So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending where you're tuning in from. I am Marianne Schörling. I'm the head of stakeholder engagement at the Geneva Macro Labs, and I will be one of your moderators today. And in the name of the whole team, I have the pleasure to welcome you to our today's online talk. And it will be about an exciting initiative around the idea of valuing natural capital and applying it for sustainable impact endeavors. You will hear more about the so-called Blue Boat Initiative and some guiding ideas behind it from two excellent speakers, and I'll introduce them in a minute. But let me first thank you all for tuning in to our first online talk after the summer break. And for our newcomers today, 2 sentences about the Geneva Macro Labs. Maybe you can put the slide away. Perfect. We are a think and do tank. We're based in Geneva. We leverage the institutional, financial, and human capital of Geneva and beyond. We can see that now we are becoming more and more international. Thank you that you're all tuning in from all the different parts of the world. And how do we work? Well, we co-develop solutions, policy measures, we incubate new concepts, we host conversations like the one today, we publish solutions papers, and what seems very special to me about us is that we are bringing together outstanding thought leaders who share our objectives of intersectoral collaboration on how to use new technology, how to use innovation in a sustainable, accessible, and just manner. All right, so today, a couple of words about today. We will first listen to 2 short 10-minute presentations from our distinguished speakers, and then we will have about 30 minutes for an open discussion. Please make sure to make use of the chat. You can post your questions in the chat during the presentations, but as well during the Q&A session, which will be moderated by my colleague Daniel Samaan, who is our head of research. You also are more than welcome to directly comment and interact with our speakers during the interactive session in the second half. So our aim is to inspire you, our aim is to challenge you, and obviously we would love you to join our community and our efforts. And I can already see that we have the slide about our agenda available. So let's have a look. Our first speaker will be Ralph Chami. Ralph is currently Assistant Director of the Institute for Capacity Development at the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. He is financial economist who was featured by the Washington Post as the expert who quantified how valuable whales are to fighting climate change. And Ralph's publication is really long, so I will not even try to go through all the publications, but let me summarize it this way. It's a list where you can really see his expertise on financial inclusion, remittances, financial regulations, and market development, the cost of equity, and much more. Ralph holds a PhD in economics from the Johns Hopkins University. He received 2014 the IMF Operational Excellence Award. And as a final fun fact, Ralph is also a semi-professional guitarist over 40 years. I think this is a fun fact that many moderators share about you. But what I would like to personally recommend is his composition called Harmony, which he introduced as a music piece that showcases what can be achieved through new multilateralism. And multilateralism is definitely needed for what we are going to talk about with Ralph today. He will share, besides his energy, some ideas on why we need to put a price tag on our natural resources. All right, our second speaker will be Patricia Morales CEO of Filantropia Cortes Solari. It's a Chilean philanthropic initiative which promotes comprehensive and sustainable development through science, education, and conservation. Patricia is also an economist at the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium, and we'll talk today about the Blue Boat Initiative, which perfectly complements Ralph's endeavors. And I will say a couple of more words about her background before her presentation. So, Ralph, the overall idea is that destroying nature not only harms the economy, but also makes it more difficult to combat the emissions we are now trying to reduce. The numbers are quite striking, and I would like to cite them for all those who haven't came across them. You calculated, Ralph, that the value of a whale during its lifespan is about $2 million in carbon capture and carbon sequestration services. In contrast, a whale's meat is worth about $50,000. The difference in case of African forest elephants is quite similar. So African forest elephants' tusks are worth about $40,000 each, while the carbon capture and carbon sequestration of a single living one is supposed to be worth $1.75 million. So what does science actually tell us, and what are the implications for sustainable policy making? Ralph, the floor is yours, and we're really looking forward to your input.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for the very nice introduction. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we can really hear you well.
And first of all, I'd like to thank Eckhart and Renata for giving me the, we've been collaborating with each other for quite some time now, and thank you again for the opportunity to bring the voice of nature to everyone around the globe. You asked a very good question, and if I may, rather than answer it directly, I just prepared a few slides I'd like to share with everyone, sort of tell a story, and then I'm happy to take any questions that this may evoke. Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen with you. Let me know if that works. It says here, I need your permission to be able to share. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So you need to allow me to share my screen, Marianne.
Just a second. I mean, I can share it for you now.
This is Renata.
Okay. Still not allowing me to share my screen from my side.
Ralph, you have remote control now.
Voila. Okay. All right. And thank you again. And so your question is, you know, the pricing of putting a price on nature. Let me just quickly say something about this, which is we live in a market economy. And if anything has a price of zero, unfortunately, it has no value, although it may intrinsically has value, and therefore it has no voice. It has no voice in the discussion. So this is what you learn when you work in a market economy. So as long as prices are used, we need to use prices to get a voice into a discussion, which is what I'm trying to do here. So with the question is, you know, everybody now talks about the valuation of capital, natural capital. And the question is, for what purpose? At least from my side, the purpose is to build an economy that in the core, in its foundation, encompasses nature. Okay? But in order to build such an economy, we need to start with what the facts are, especially when we talk about the nature, natural capital. And these are some examples of coming from science. The first slide says, science tells us what? Tells us that the oceans are the lungs of the planet. People seem to forget that 4/5 of the planet is water. We are land-based mammals, and therefore we always think about land. But 4/5 of the planet is actually water. By the way, in the water lives these microscopic organisms called phytoplankton. They do a wonderful thing. When they breathe, they absorb carbon dioxide and they emit oxygen. Okay, just the opposite of what we do. And so these phytoplanktons produce 50% of all oxygen in the world. People like to think of them as every other breath that you and I take is due to the phytoplankton. And they capture about 30% of all the carbon dioxide that is out there. In terms of carbon dioxide, just to give you an idea, I gave you 2 examples. This is like equivalent to 4 Amazon forests per year. So the phytoplankton, these microscopic organisms that you would never see in your life, are responsible for capturing enough carbon dioxide, which is equivalent to 4 Amazon forests per year. Okay. So I need to go to the next slide. Okay. But in the ocean lives a very interesting and the largest creature that ever lived, which is the great whale, the blue whale, in fact. And these whales turns out that science tells us they do something incredible, which is they capture, we are all, by the way, we're all carbon units, humans and animals are all carbon units. But the whales capture so much carbon on their body. This is coming from science. About 30 on average, because economists always like to think on average. On average, a whale captures about 33 tons of carbon dioxide. And that's equivalent to about 1,500 trees just on their body. They do something else that is incredible, which is they fertilize the phytoplankton. And I just said about phytoplankton are the lungs of the planet. So they directly on their body and indirectly through the fertilization of the phytoplankton, whales capture enough carbon dioxide, which is equivalent to thousands of trees out there. Okay, next, please. All right, what else do whales do? Turns out the science also tells us that when you have a healthy whale population, you have a healthy biosystem around them. I have been with I have had the fortune of being in studying the blue whales out in the Sea of Cortez. And when you see a blue whale feeding, whales feeding, there's a whole ecosystem around it that is feeding, the dolphins and the birds and this and that. So the science also has tells us when you have a vibrant whale population, you also have a vibrant fishing or fishes or fisheries. And so whales also contribute to the fishing industry. The fishing industry is about $350 billion industry. I'm only counting here the wild fishing. It's about 150 billion in ticket sales. The next slide, please. Also, whale watching industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So the whales do a number of things in terms of services. Okay, for us, they capture carbon. They also help in terms of more whales, there are more fishes, and when you have more whales, then you have a vibrant whale watching industry. Their cousins on land, the elephants, also turned out to do something wonderful. And this is very recent finding. I got a phone call from scientists who did this work, Fabio Berzaghi from that lab in France. And he had studied this thing with his colleagues, where he finds that when forest elephants, these are the forest elephants, in Africa also contribute to carbon sequestration in trees through the way they walk and the way they actually consume food. They give life to, they allow older trees and bigger trees to grow bigger and taller and as a result sequester more carbon in their roots. Next slide, please. Okay, so why do we need all of this? This is what I call data, and the data is coming from the science. Okay, because once you have that, then you start to think of nature as a vibrant nature is very important. Because up until now, our view of nature was extractive, meaning we only valued things when we take things out of nature. When we kill a whale and we put its meat on a plate and serve it in a restaurant, it's worth something. Fish is only valuable to us when it's served to you in a 4-star restaurant for $50. That's when we value fish. Whereas up till now, what I've shown you, whether it be the whale or be the elephant, is that nature, when it's alive, could be far more valuable. And I'm about to make that case. But I just want to point out here, because I will focus mostly on the ocean side of it, but I'm happy to talk about the land side of it, is that COP25 to me was a watershed event. And I'm so happy that Patricia is on this webinar, because Chile has the presidency of COP25. And Chile at COP25 changed the name of the game as far as I'm concerned. It took the ocean from being a victim of acidification and pollution to an ocean that plays a very important role, a mitigating role, a climate mitigation role. It gave that, and there was a general agreement that the ocean is a factor in climate change mitigation. So what you have then, you have the science, and the next thing is if you want to build an economy around what we call, let's say, the blue ocean economy, well, you need the pillars, you need to value things. What are you talking about? So we need the science. From the science, we need to build the financial side of it. We need to value the science. Once we value the science, then we can engage the policymakers, the private sector. The question is why? Because they don't speak the language. The policymakers and the financial sector do not speak the language of science. They speak their own language, which is dollars and cents. And if you really want to make a difference in this life, you need to speak the language of the audience to whom you're addressing. So we know the science, we need to reach the policymakers, we need to reach the private sector, the local communities. Then you need to figure out what is it that they need to know in order to bring them on board to build this. What we aspire to is a new paradigm that has nature in its core. And that's what I'm going to build for you very quickly before I stop. So the next slide says, well, okay, so you told me the science, the whale captures carbon and it helps the fishes and it helps the tourism industry. Well, how much is a whale worth in terms of only its services? I am here not talking about the intrinsic value of a whale, which is priceless. Intrinsic value of life is priceless. This is just in terms of the services that it provides us. And at a minimum, what we calculated is that the value of a whale at a minimum is about $2 million. That's $2 million per whale in present value. Okay, now back to your point, which is yes, versus what? Versus killing a whale and serving it as meat on a plate, and that whole whale, beautiful creature that's alive, is worth $2 million, is now worth maximum $80,000 if it happens to be a fin whale. This is in the market where people still eat whale meat. You could make the same argument with the elephants. When you look at I'm only talking here about forest elephants, and I'm only talking about one service they provide for us, which is carbon sequestration. And look at this. This is just the price. The value of it turns out to be per elephant is $1.75 million in carbon. I have not even talked about the value of an elephant in terms of its impact on the bioeconomy, or the ecosystem, or the bioservices, or other things, or even in tourism. So now you have the science, you have the financing side. The question is, how do we go from there to building the economy, a regenerative economy? Well, in anything, if you want to create these markets, you need policy. Policy is very important in the sense that you need the proclivity of the authorities and the governments to move in the same direction so that you can provide the legal rights. Quick example, New Zealand right now has conferred personhood on rivers. In New Zealand right now, animals are referred to as sentient beings, meaning they have feelings, they have thinking, they think, they feel just like us. Okay, this is not a new discovery. We've always known that, but we developed amnesia about 300 years ago. So we're just remembering these things. So when you have the policy, you provide the legal rights. Once you have the legal rights, you start to build a regulatory environment around these natural, I'm sorry to use the word assets, I'm a financial economist, okay? And once you define their rights, and then you have obligations towards them, then you need to protect them, so you need to monitor them. Then you bring in enforcement, and then in order to build markets, you cannot just build markets on enforcement or penalties. You need to provide incentives for the various actors to be stakeholders in the new economy that we all aspire to build. Okay, so now we're talking about an ocean as a renewable resource. So off with the old view of the ocean as an extractive, resource. You pull things out of the ocean. What I'm talking about is an ocean where you keep things in the ocean. Because if nature is valuable, if whales are valuable, we need to allow them to come back. They used to be 5 million, we're down to 1 million. Elephants used to be, these forest elephants were over 1 million, now we're less than 100,000. We have in Ian, the famous Ian Redmond, I saw his name on the call, and he is the expert, so he can tell you more about it than surely I can. Anyway, when it comes to this, now I'm building the case for the sort of the blue ocean economy, or the blue economy, if you like. When you need to establish the legal rights, the protection, you use the valuation of the natural services. Once you have the valuation, then private sector starts to look at you differently. It starts to see that conservation is not about being nice or not being nice. No, there is profits in it. There's profits in allowing nature to recuperate and allowing nature to grow. Okay, and it's not about altruism here. Sure, if you're driven by altruism, fine and dandy, but it's much more than that. So, but for any conservation effort to be sustainable, let us not kid ourselves. The local communities have to understand that it's in their best interest to look after these wonderful creatures or cetaceans or non-cetaceans for that matter. Okay, it's not enough that we think it's valuable. All stakeholders, certainly the local communities, start to see that they can benefit from having a regenerative nature, from having a healthy elephant population, healthy whale population, and so forth. And they see it through the creation of employment, of valuable employment for you, of meaningful employment for them in this new economy. Only then you're talking about a sort of viable ocean economy. And finally, what I'm really describing for you is really a win-win model within our reach. This is not some theoretical construct, okay? Because it relies on a few things that you have to keep in mind. The sustainability or economic system very much depends on the sustainability or ecosystem. If there's one thing that we learned from this COVID fiasco and disaster for all of us, is that here's a virus that you cannot see. Presumably, it started in a local wet market that you and I would never visit, never get the chance to visit. Okay, brought the whole world to a standstill, and the economies of the greatest economies and the poor economies to their knees. That tells you the power of nature. That tells you that nature, you cannot tame nature as they used to teach us a long time ago. Okay, in fact, nature tames us. So what we need to do, we need to partner with nature. We need to go back to our roots, which is we are part of nature. We are part of this natural world. And we need to rethink our paradigm in a way that integrates nature into the DNA of this new economy that I'm talking about. Only then can you talk about economic growth that is sustainable, inclusive, and market friendly. And it's within our reach. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. That was excellent. And it was a delight listening to you, as always. I'm sure our audience has much more questions than the one that I can see from Chris. Chris, we will come back to your question during the Q&A session. On that note, we have great news for all of you who would like to learn more about Ralph's work in that field. We have the pleasure and the honor that Ralph, your publication with a couple of other colleagues with the title Valuing Nature-Based Solutions to Climate Change, a Framework with Applications to Elephants and Whales, is actually the first publication that we are now featuring in our Geneva Macro Labs discussion paper series, which you find on our website. I'll send you the link in the chat. And it's a new initiative that we're launching now that serves as an exchange platform for preliminary research, including think pieces, policy briefs on sustainable development, new impact concepts. And it's a way for us to respond to your great feedback and your participation, our community, to our work and events. And if you would like to learn more about the Geneva Macro Labs discussion paper series, please reach out to us and share your ideas. You can drop us a line at research@gemlabs.ch. You can see it in the chat, the address. So have a look at our discussion paper number 1. It's a thought-provoking piece that opens, I would say, new possibilities for action. And that brings us to our second speaker, Patricia Morales Errázuriz. And yeah, Patricia, thank you for joining us today. I would like to share a couple of words about your background with the audience. Patricia, you're welcome. So you're not, yes. Yes, you can share your screen already. I'll say a couple of words about your background. So you are not only the CEO of Filantropia Cortes Solari, but you're also a former politician, a versatile panelist, and you have received, wonderful, I can see the slides, you received the 2007 Women Speak Out Award for promoting the role of women in public spaces and politics in particular. I understand that you were part of the public policy division of the regional office of the Food and Agriculture Organization, and you served as well the Chilean Ministry of Economics and the National Commission for Scientific and Technological Research. And one final highlight about your background that I would like to share, and that's a delight for me, you were the youngest woman in the history of Chile who was in charge of leading a national party and previously a political think tank, as you founded and served as president of the Progressive Party of Chile. So you know really well how to bring sciences, how to bring politics together. And we are now looking forward to hear more about the Blue Boat Initiative, who's behind it, how does it relate to Ralph's deliberations, and yeah, what is about the ecosystem services that you would like to explain to us. So over to you, we're looking forward.
So thank you very much, Marianne, for the presentation and the floor, and thank you, Eckhart, for this invitation with our friend Ralph. So I'm going to talk today about the importance of evaluating ecosystem, because we really believe from Cortes Solari Philanthropy and Mary Foundation that this is a kind of blind spot of the economy, and this is our main concern. For that, I'm going to talk about that, then I'm going to introduce Mary Foundation and introduce the Blue Boat Initiative, and there is other people from Mary Foundation in this meeting with us. So we all know the importance of oceans. Ralph already talked about that. The thing is that it's really crucial in terms of food, climate regulation. They also produce half of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. They absorb 26% of anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere. And economists used to say that oceans represent more than 60% of the global GDP. The thing is that this number doesn't include the real value of the ecosystem services. And maybe this is the whole problem, because we used to have a kind of a competition between environmental argument and economic argument, let's say employment and their contribution to the GDP. And for us, this discussion is misguided, since what it's really need is to evaluate, first of all, those marine ecosystem services. So we need to move to a blue economy, what is a sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improve livelihoods and jobs, and ocean ecosystem health. It allows us to encompass many activities, for example, renewable energy with tourism, climate change, waste management, fishery, maritime transport, and so on. But obviously, the first stage for that is the necessity to have enough science, and after the science, as Ralph said, we need to produce evaluation of ocean ecosystem services. Otherwise, we cannot value the ecosystem damage and its impact on the real GDP. So what we are trying to do from Mary Foundation is to study the oceans and to consider oceans not only from the raw material perspective, but also evaluating their ecosystem services. And the first stage was this paper that you were talking about, and where Sonia Español, our main leader of oceans from Mary Foundation, participated too. Sonia is there also. And we discovered that the value of whales ecosystem services is of $4 million per whale, and that's a lot for us. And we believe that from the moment that we have a price on those marine ecosystem services, we can regulate and develop a framework regulation. This is what we are trying to do with our Ministry of Environment. We are trying to develop a national regulation, but first we need a price on that, because what happens is that if we have a collision between a shift and a whale, we can't put a price on that collision, and obviously the industry can integrate that price and change their behavior. So the first stage for us, it's obviously to collect data, scientific data, in order to understand all the maritime ecosystem services and then evaluate them. Okay, so we all know what the Stern Review told us about the necessity to invest around 1% of the global GDP in initiatives that mitigate climate change in order to avoid the recession that we're going to face otherwise. So we really believe from Marine Foundation that we need a multidimensional answer to the climate change that include environmental dimension, as for example, initiatives like Global Initiative, but we also need activities and initiative in the social dimension, cultural dimension to change behaviors, and economical dimension. And for the economical dimension, we are working another initiative beyond the scope of this webinar to try to promote the dialogue between finance and environment. It's really necessary and important to promote the investment in initiatives that try to capture carbon according to us. So who we are? Marine Foundation belongs to Filantropia Cortes Solari. This is an initiative that is 18 years old right now. Francisca Cortes Solari is our executive president. She belongs to the Solari family. The Solari family has a very important economical impact in South America, and she really believes that the climate change is an urgency and we really need to do something just right now. So we have those foundations to do our program in science, education, and conservation, and we also develop a conservation model in 3 natural parks around Chile. You have to imagine that Chile is a country that started in Norway and Europe and finished in Chad. We are a very long country, so it's kind of a natural laboratory where we can monitor the climate change because we have several different kind of ecosystems. So in MARI, as I said, we do scientific research and environmental education for conservation of strategic terrestrial and marine ecosystem around the world, okay? So we have been working last 8 years around oceans and in particular cetacean and whales. We started studies in 2012 around passive acoustic monitoring of blue whales. At the same time, we developed several educational programs around whales. And then in 2014, we start with blue whales expedition. We do that every year. And eventually we developed this new project, Blue Boat Initiative. So Blue Boat Initiative has 2 main objectives. The first one is to regulate the maritime traffic in order to protect whales, because whales are very important in terms of capture carbon. Obviously, it's a pilot. We should do the same with a lot of species, but we decided to start with blue whales and all the whales because we already studied a lot about that. And for the other hand, we want to evaluate different species in maritime ecosystem services to improve the public policy in environment in Chile. So I'm going to introduce you a very short video to present Blue Boat Initiative.
For millions of years, whales have populated the waters from the Antarctic to the Arctic, sequestering 33 tons of CO2 over their lifetime. That's 1,500 times more than a tree. Their bodies absorb the CO2 so that it does not go back into the atmosphere, thus helping to reduce one of the main gases causing global warming. As they swim, the whales also provide nutrients to the oceans. These nutrients are a source of microscopic life, such as plankton, which helps the oceans to produce 50% of the oxygen consumed by the planet. It also serves as food for other organisms, creating an endless chain that favors the entire marine ecosystem and human beings who benefit from fishing activities. The more whales, the more fish. However, whales are under threat. Between 2007 and 2019, over 1,200 whales died. This is why the Blue Boat Initiative was born. The Blue Boat Initiative will install and connect the first South American network of early warning acoustic buoys for whale protection. A network of intelligent buoys with a complex system of hydrophones, oceanographic sensors and transmitters, which will begin to operate in the south of Chile. This is one of the main feeding and breeding areas for whales in the southern hemisphere, thanks to the great supply of food and shelter generated by the unique combination of fjords and the subantarctic and oceanic currents. The Blue Boat Initiative will begin in the interior sea of Chiloé, the Gulf of Ancud, and the Gulf of Corcovado, and then cover the entire migratory route of the whales. The satellite information sent by the buoys will allow vessels to be warned in real time about the presence of whales, so that they can take measures to avoid hitting these valuable cetaceans. These buoys will also make it possible to collect vital data regarding the global warming of the oceans, thanks to the oceanographic sensors that will monitor the health of the oceans. The ocean is an essential part of the cycle of life, and we can help keep it healthy, multiplying and benefiting the whole world. Be part of this unprecedented Chilean initiative. Help us change the history of the ocean and the world.
This video explained with a lot of detail the technical part of Blue Boat Initiative. So we are going to start in the south, in the north of Patagonia, the south of the country, and then cover the rest. And we are working very closely with Mexico because we would like to start at the same time with Mexico in order to cover the whole region. This is why we are working with their government. The most important thing, maybe as Ralph said, is the importance of the policy. If you need to show to the politicians that it can work in terms of economics. Usually, at least in South America, when a Minister of Environment has to talk with the Minister of Finance, he already lost the conversation, you see, because it's just not rentable to invest in environment. So we really believe that if we put a price on these marine ecosystem services, this can change all the whole conversation. Maybe this is the most important message of today. And just to finish, it's really important to consider, and I never stop to say that climate change is a multidimensional issue. So we really need to focus on the financial one at the same time as social, cultural, and environmental one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia. This was fascinating. It was lovely to have as well the video, which is, I think, one of the first times that we have it in our online talk. You did a great summary of why we need to turn the marine ecosystem services from a blind spot of the economy and sustainability to a commonly agreed priority for our future impact agenda. I will hand now directly over to Daniel Samaan because we are running a bit late and we want to make sure that we can now address the questions in the chat and maybe other questions that participants have. So I'm handing over to you, Daniel. Please, all of you participate, contribute and comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. Thank you very much to our two presenters and welcome everybody. So we have about 20 to 30 minutes for our Q&A. If you allow me to extend our webinar a little bit. So what I will try is to pick the questions in the order of the chat box, but I may jump from time to time a little bit depending on the content of the questions. And I would encourage you to post the questions yourself so that we have as much interaction as possible. So Ralph, I would like to start with you. There are a couple questions actually on valuation. And before I hand over to Chris Butler-Stroud, I have a question on how did you arrived with the valuation of the $80,000 and the $2 million for the whales, for example. The $80,000, I understand that's the money that somebody is willing to pay for the meat to eat. How about the 2 million? Is this a theoretical value that takes into consideration the opportunity cost of damaging the environment, or is that also a price that somebody's actually willing to pay? And then next question is by Chris Butler-Stroud. Ralph.
Okay, do I go ahead?
Please.
Thank you. It's a very good question. Let me cut to the chase. I'm a financial economist by training. I come from the markets. The aim of the $2 million is actually actionable price. It's not a theoretical price. And the technique is very simple. Once you understand how much carbon does a whale capture, you can think of a whale, and then once you have that, then I can transfer that into what we call, it becomes an asset as far as I'm concerned, in the language of the markets. So you have an asset that captures carbon as every year that it's alive. Some whales live 125 years, some whales live 95 years, some whales live 75 years, depending on their species. What we did, we took an average of 60 years. So you have a whale, as long as it's alive, it's capturing carbon through every year through its fertilization of the phytoplankton. So think of this as a bond, if you like, that is giving you dividend payments, if you like, or some coupon payments, if you like, every year for the span of its lifetime. So what you do, once you know that, you can discount that to the present, and you come up with the present value of the stream of benefits that the whale is providing for you through the carbon capture for the 60 years that it's alive. Now, the whale also captures carbon on its body, but that's in steady state, meaning an adult whale captures 33 tons of carbon dioxide, equivalent of 33 tons of carbon dioxide on its body. Think of this, again, to translate it into the language of finance, think of it as a bond with a balloon payment at the end. Because when the whale dies, what I didn't have the chance to expand on, it sinks, it's negatively buoyant, meaning it sinks to the bottom of the ocean and it stays there for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's just there. It disintegrates very slowly over that period. So that means when it dies, it's taking down with it 33 tons of carbon dioxide. So that's one-time payment that you can also discount to the present. What's left for you to do is to figure out, okay, what is the price of carbon? And there you can go to the carbon exchange market and figure out what the price. By the way, the price of carbon dioxide now a tonnage is going up. I mean, even my own organization, the IMF, talks about a price of carbon that should be $70 or $75. The price actually that I took for this calculation was $23. Okay, and as the day of reckoning is upon us, meaning as the climate crisis is here and now getting worse, that price of carbon is only going to skyrocket, which means the value only in carbon sequestration alone is going to be much higher than what I'm giving you right now. That's why I was making the case with the minimum, not with the upper bound, but actually with the lower bound. So it's purely financial approach to a scientific finding. Okay, so I am not calculating here, please, for your audience, I'm not calculating here the value of, the ecosystem or any other, services for which there are no markets. That's where I think conservation used to fail. Because when you approach people and you say, what is the value of the ecosystem and its beauty? What's the market for that? What is the price for that? What I did with my colleagues is we looked at the services for which markets already exist, meaning I didn't have to do price discovery. The price came from the markets. So we did that with the carbon, we did that with tourism. We know what the ticket sales for whale tourism is, and we know what the fishery value is. So you take the present value of all of these things, and what you come up with is a $2 million. Okay, so it's not, the 80,000 is publishable number that you can Google at any time and say, what is the price of a dead fin whale that is chopped up into pieces and served on a plate, right? the fin whale is the next largest to a blue whale, and unfortunately is $80,000. So what I was trying to just, the case is that a living whale is far more valuable to us in services that are important to us. And let me underscore here, I am not valuing the intrinsic value of a beautiful creature of life itself, only in terms of its services to us. If we were to add other things that the whales would do, such as its impact on the biodiversity, and these would be icing on the cake. You would be adding more value to what's already a very valuable and important creature, to our own existence. And again, the reason I did this is I wanted to talk to my own audience. Who's my audience? I've lived at the IMF for 22 years. Okay, I was a professor of finance. So I'm talking to the people who are not the bleeding heart environmentalists necessarily, who are not driven by altruism to care for other creatures. I'm talking to the people who says, what's in it for me? Why should I care about the whale? The answer is because the whale is doing things for you, have been doing things on our behalf for millions of years. So it's very valuable, but arbitrarily we assign a price of 0 to it. There is no justification for assigning a price of 0 to something, to a creature that has been providing value to us, to our whole society for millions of years. That would apply not only for the whale, but for the elephants and for every other creature. These were just examples of what we can do. And the reason I chose the whale is to capture people's imagination. I could have easily talked about the krill, but hardly anybody knows what a krill is, let alone a phytoplankton. I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ralph, also for pointing out that the price of carbon is essential for the valuation. So the price of the whale depends on the price of carbon. So it's really important that we have markets for carbon and for other things. So thank you very much. I would like to ask Chris, if he's still in the call, to ask his question. And then the next question, also about valuation, I would ask Julien Zori to pose this question after that. Maybe we can collect those two questions. Chris, do you want to go first?
No, thank you. Interesting, just on that last point, the UK government's predictions on price of carbon is somewhere between now, I think they would agree the true price is closer to about $70, but they're predicting 2050 to be $250 to $300. So that demand is always going to be there. And whatever the residual carbon footprint we have after getting as close to net zero as we possibly can, there's going to be this demand for nature-based solutions to absorb that. My question to you, Ralph, was when you were quoting $50,000, $80,000 in terms of price of the whale. Of course, one of the issues that we face is that not all the costs are actually internalized into that process. So, for example, the Japanese government has supported through marketing, through advocacy at bodies like the IWC, but also conditional aid to countries which are coming to meetings like the IWC to support them. Were you taking those kind of things into consideration, or was that just the price that you would go to market with at the moment? Well, thank you.
It's a very good question. No, it's just the market price. I was not looking at these other very important activities around the whale as a consumption good. Remember, when we were doing this work, my job, I thought, was to bring to the world this knowledge that existed in science. I mean, when I talk to scientists, marine biologists that taught me all of this, they know this. Is what I thought the best thing I could do as a financial economist with my colleagues was to translate this knowledge that was sitting in one discipline to the rest of us, right? So that all of us become stakeholders in this conversation, because for this conversation to move forward, we all have to be in it. You cannot leave anybody out. And we've left people like me out of this conversation. We demonize people like me who are not necessarily environmentalists by nature, let's say. So I wanted to talk to that crowd and say, you have a stake in this. So that's why I was trying, as I'm a trained scientist in my early career. So I do things mathematically by making the minimum case, not the maximal case. So when I tell you the value of a whale is 2 million, trust me, it's a lot more. If I were just to take the $70, just multiply 2 million by 3. There you go. Now it's 7 million. If you, by the way, you're absolutely right. The price of carbon is only going to increase. We have other strand of work that we're doing where the pro rata carbon pricing per country could be as high as $1,200 per tonnage of carbon. As the 1.5 degree change, you know, if you want to not breach the 1.5, that price of carbon is only going to skyrocket. And with it, the value of nature-based solutions. What we're trying to do here is not the price. The price is just a mechanism to grab your attention and to say a regenerative nature is incredibly valuable to us, not theoretically, not morally, no, in terms of dollar and cents. We can create an economy. We need to think outside the box. We need to stop what we've been doing, and which is suicide. I mean, look at us. Look at me. Rather than me being in front of you guys talking in a conversation where we can see, and we're hiding at home, talking to each other through this medium because it's this virus that you can't even see has put us all in our houses, in our homes, talking to each other. That's the power of nature. When nature is telling us, sending a very clear signal. I've been always part of this equation, but you, i.e. humans, for whatever reason, you've decided that you are separate from this natural world. But guess what? You are not separate from this natural world. You cannot take me for granted. This is what we've done with nature. Nor can you assume that nature is infinitely lived, or that nature has infinite commodities. I have value, you know I have value, but you've assigned me a price of 0. You've enslaved nature in a sense. And this is what you call it, a nature rebellion, if you like. Nature reminding us of our role, of our part in the natural world. Sorry, I used your question to give, but by the way, I'm a financial economist. At the end of the day, I have to make the case for you. And I can make the case for a viable economy beyond just climate risk. Because everybody now talks about climate risk, obsessed with the climate, but I'm talking about the economy of tomorrow. The economy of tomorrow is much more than about climate mitigation. It's about well-being for all of us, for nature, for everything that is living in nature. We can do it if we allow ourselves to do this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. I don't want to stay on the valuation for so much longer. I promised Julien to ask his question, which is also related. Maybe you can pose your question very brief, and then we move to some other questions beyond valuation. Julien, do you want to pose your question very briefly, please?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, so if we assume that we can give a price to all these services, whether they are provisioning or regulating or cultural services, how do we make a transaction? So how do I actually buy some piece of whale and end up paying for those services in your mind?
Great question. So how do we go from the price to basically creating an economy? All right. So the first thing is you need the policy. You need the policy that says, let's make it concrete. Okay. First thing you start off, you say, in the case of the whale, or we can pick the elephant if you like. Maybe let's pick the elephant. Let's just keep talking about the whale. Okay. The elephant, there are elephants, and we have the famous Ian Redmond among us, so he can correct me. Let's say we have the forest elephants in Gabon. All right. So we go to Gabon, and the government of Gabon says, each elephant, these guys have valued the elephant at $1.75 million. So now I'm going to define the elephant as a good, as a public good, because it belongs to the country. And if anybody were to harm the elephant by mistake or not by mistake, the penalty is $1.7 million. But that's a system of penalties. That's just to show commitment on the part of the government that I'm taking this seriously. So the first thing is to define the rights of the asset, like New Zealand did. This is an asset, it has rights, and we have obligations towards it. All right, next thing is, well, what is the value? Well, the value of the asset is $1.75 million per elephant. Now, guess what you can do with it? many examples I can give you. One of it is you can value then the stock of elephants that you have in let's say in Gabon, and that becomes on the government's balance sheet a value, right? Because it's 1.75 million times the number of elephants that you have. If you have 1,000 elephants, now you're talking about over 1 billion. So what you do, once you have that on your balance sheet, the country itself now can borrow against it, can reduce its debt to the face value of, that's called debt. You can create a swap arrangement. It's called elephant for, or debt for nature, or debt for elephant swap. Okay. You can bring in the insurance companies. Insurance companies would be very much interested because they would be looking at the elephant as a new class of assets. They'd be like, wait a minute, that's a nature-based asset. I can insure it. Meaning they would go and say, hey, I can insure this asset. If something happens to it, for a premium, I will insure it. Suddenly you're bringing in the private sector. You could do the same thing with the whales. Patricia's talking about the Blue Boat Initiative. They have some of the most important blue whales in the world, the Chilean blue whales. And most of the time they're residing along their very long coast. So the government of Chile could as an example, announce that the whales are an asset, or if you like, an asset with obligations. You confer on them personhood like they did in New Zealand. Next thing is, well, what's the value? The value is in the case of the whale, actually in Chile, we valued it with my colleagues at almost $4 million per blue whale, because these are the largest creatures in the world. Next thing is, once you have that value, you put the legal contour around it, the legal framework, and then the market starts to take you seriously because, wait a minute, so that's a value, that's an asset with a value. What if I were to provide insurance? Zurich Insurance would come in, Lloyd's of London could come in and say, I will insure the tanker if by mistake it were to hit a whale, because the probability of hitting a whale in the ocean is very, very, very small. Therefore, it's insurable from the perspective of the insurance companies. So they would insure, if you were to hit a whale, they would insure the tanker for a premium. But then the buoys come in that Patricia's talking about. Because what happens, the insurance company would tell the tanker, or the owner of the tanker, say, if you were to install the device on your tanker, I would reduce your premium. Just like you and I buy alarm system on our cars. When you buy the alarm system and you install it on your car, that's not to protect you, that's to protect the insurance company that's insuring your car. That's why your premium goes down. It's the
Ralph,
same.
Sorry that interrupted there. You made so many important points, and I think Patricia can actually build on that, because she was kind of referring to her government and to this foreseen collaboration, and how a framework from a jurisdiction could adapt to these efforts. Patricia, what are your thoughts to what Ralph just really explained in depth to us?
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. I would like to put this in a larger context, and also bring to the table other questions that I'm reading on the chat. Someone asked there, why a majority of the private investors in the world are still investing on fossil energy and unsustainable business model. I think maybe this is a core problem. It's still not rentable to invest. It's not rentable to invest in science, okay? So we already know that. We know that science are developed a lot of evidence about different nature-based solution, means species that capture carbon or have other facilities and other, well, so we know that. We also know that we have artificial solutions to capture carbon as well. The thing is that we don't have a valuation of those ecosystem services. We don't have a regulation, and we need to find the proper way to make it rentable for investors. I think that this is the real clue of this problem. From the family office of Francisca, we are working on one possible solution that I hope that we're going to present and introduce you in a few months. But this is one of a lot of solutions that I hope that we're going to see as soon as possible. In Chile, from the government, what the government is trying to do is to develop a public regulation. For that, the most important thing for us, because our constitution is like that, is to need to have a price. In Chile, if you want to protect something in nature, you need a price on that. If someone, I don't know, burn a lot of territory to make him pay, you need to have a price on that. This is terrible, but it's like that. This is why it's so important to have a price on whales ecosystem services in order to develop a market around a sheep market. And it's complicated because sometimes scientists doesn't like to talk about how economy is going to take in charge, you see, the environment. It's like if we were, I don't know, if we were burn everything, but it's really necessary to start with that. From Blue Boat Initiative, we are start first of all with a regulation committee. The regulation committee is trying to promote the fact that Chile, as the cooper, as the tree, as the fishery active, we also have other species that we need to protect because they have a lot of value. For example, whales, for example, sea fuel, for example, dolphins, and a lot of else. So this is the first stage. But for that, we need more database about science in order to do valuation. Another step completely different is to promote the investment for the private sector to this kind of initiative. And for make it happen, we need to find a way to make it rentable. Otherwise, we're going to develop a market to protect whales, and it's going to be great, but it's not the last stage. The last stage is to include the investors in this kind of initiatives too. And for that, we needed to make it rentable.
Thank you, Patricia. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I would propose one more question, again, a little bit more about the operations, how these concepts could work. Sean, if you're still on the call, do you want to pose your question? And please, a brief answer after that.
Hi everybody. Hi Ralph. Hi Patricia. I enjoyed the speech very much. And Ralph, I downloaded the original document from the IMF site, so I've gone through your methodology in great detail. I would totally agree with your evaluations. I was just wondering, two quick questions, whether you had any plans to have any independent auditing using an independent carbon finance project environmental auditor like Vera or Gold Standard. And based on that question, on the answer to that question, if you have plans to cooperate with any company to actually issue carbon credits or voluntary offsets based on an evaluation.
Yeah, Ralph, maybe you go first, but Patricia, if you also want to answer this question, you're also welcome to do so. But please.
I didn't get the last part.
The second part of my question was whether, based on any independent valuation by Gold Standard or Vera, if there is a concrete or specific plan to issue voluntary market carbon credits.
So,
well, this is a very interesting question. Actually, we are developing with the ministry. We analyze the different kind of market that we have in terms of carbon, and we have the UN carbon or the UN market, the formal market. It's not that easy to enter in that market. You have to cross several boundaries. So maybe what we are trying to develop from the Family Office of Francisca Cortes Solari is how to develop the private market. We believe that private market go much quicker, you see. So I cannot talk about this other project, but the thing is to, first of all, have several initiatives in Chile and around the world that can capture carbon, and try to evaluate those initiatives, and then put maybe those initiatives in a private market. I believe that we need to find a better way to exchange in a stock market those kind of initiatives if we really want to promote those investments. At the same time, we need obviously policy, as Ralph said, with new regulation, but it's going to be easy to do this kind of regulation. It's not that difficult. It's just a matter to say that several species are national species that we have to take care about that. Someone in the chat asked how to define which species belong to the national state or to the international community. It's not that difficult. It depends on the species. We have some whales that cross really around Chile, let's say, and other whales that cross to Peru and so on. So there is enough science, evidence science to do this job. But what we really need to focus on is to develop a private market to make the exchange easier. I think that we are not that far, but we need to prove to the investor that this is a real rentable thing, because usually when you talk about low economics, it's like a scientific talking about economy. So it's not something very trustable in the financial market. I really believe that this is a real challenge here, you see.
Ralph, on the auditing, very quickly before I hand over to Marianne.
Yeah, very quickly. The science is out there. I mean, if you're telling me you need a private company to vet the science, be my guest. The scientific articles are there. I'm a consumer of the science. I'm not the scientist. So the whale carbon story is well published and it's cited in our work. People can go there and download the scientific articles that I read myself and redo the calculations. The same thing with the whale. The whale comes out of a purely scientific articles published in peer-reviewed journals about how, the elephants, how much carbon they sequester, and Fabio Berzaghi is the expert on this, and that work is well known. So what's left? What's left is the financial valuation technique that we use, and that's published in the paper that Eckhart and Renata and Marianne just posted for you. It's on the SSRN. You can download it, and you can go to the appendix, and on purpose we put every single step so that you can see that it's purely application of financial techniques. Now, the trick is in the scientific model itself. I'm simplifying things. In order for you to value the whale, you have to understand, that there's a growth rate of the whale population, death rate, birth rate, years to calving, maturity, how many female it's going, how many calves are born, and all this. There's a model for that, and it comes out of the scientific world, and that's the model we were using. So that's the quick answer to your question, which is I would welcome the auditing side of this, because then you're telling me the private sector is coming into this. And to me, that's music to my ears. As to, making the case for a private sector, the beauty of this is that whenever there's an opportunity, just leave the markets. They figure it out on their own. All you got to do is create the permissive environment. We need to, for example, the governments would need to declare the whale an asset, just like they did in New Zealand for rivers. A river now is conferred personhood. Can you imagine? A river is a person, has the rights of a person, which means you have obligations towards it. That tells me someone is serious. Telling me that you have an MPA, marine protected area, as far as I'm concerned, is not enough. Is not enough, because unless you create a system of rewards and punishments, then the markets don't take you seriously in that. Okay, just telling me the ocean is protected, yeah, so what? But I can still come in there, hit a whale, kill a whale, or I can still come into an area that's protected, but there's no penalty. I shoot an elephant by mistake or on purpose, and I pay no penalty for it. The markets aren't going to go there, because then that tells me so the penalty is a sense of commitment. Then you need the incentives, as Patricia is saying. You need to create the incentives. That's when the game starts to change. And you can think of very nice PPPs, private-public partnerships. But let me finish with this. Ultimately, the success and failure of this endeavor rests with the local communities. If the local community cannot find value in the protection of the species we're talking about, then we are wasting our time. Mm-hmm. Meaning, let me put it to you, I'm a very visual person. Okay, so let me visualize it for you. At the end of the day, the poacher, who is poacher not because he grows up to be a poacher, as Ian taught me, is because he's so poor, he has no choice but to be a poacher to make ends meet to feed his family. It's only when the poacher is looking at that elephant, is about to shoot, has the elephant in the sight of his rifle, says, you know what? If he stays alive, he's worth almost $2 million. I can get gainful employment from looking after this creature alive. Because when I shoot that elephant and he dies or she dies, then the poacher basically, first of all, risks being shot by the guards, if not caught, imprisoned. He will never see the $40,000 that goes to the owner of the tusks. He barely gets a few dollars here and there. Nobody aspires to be a poacher.
So
Everybody aspires to decent living, and that's how you create incentives. You need to get to that level. You need to think at that level. How do I take all of these ideas and translate them to the local community to get local employment and therefore local ownership? Then we would have arrived.
So with this nice image, thank you very much again to both of our speakers and to all our participants in this Q&A session. We have the paper also on the Geneva Macro Labs page. And with this, thanks again. I would like to hand over to Marianne for the last words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. And also thank you to the speakers. Thank you all, to everybody from the audience. We know that we have now extended the time of our webinar. We usually try to keep it concise, but we can see that the discussion needs to go really deep, because connecting the two sectors, already private and public sector, and combining different incentives is not that easy. So thank you for your valuable insight, and thank you for answering the diversity of questions. For all of those who posted the question and we didn't come into the details, please get in touch with us. We would like also to highlight that we had Alexander Berry from the WEF, the World Economic Forum, with us today. We invited him, and he was actually sharing in the chat that the WEF is looking for ocean nature-based solutions from ocean startups. So if there is somebody among you, or you know startups who might be interested, please share. He shared the link in the chat. I will just resend it here. And yeah, so before we are closing our online talk, I would like to share a few announcements in regards to our pipeline. We will continue with our online talk series on a 1 to 2 times per month basis, and have the pleasure to continue with high-level speakers, which include over the next months the president of the Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association, Raim Ayadi, the innovation leader from the world of digits, Gilles Baudet. We'll have from the IMF again, Prakash Lugani, and Professor Leclerc from Cornell University, and many others who will cover topics that include blue transition, impact designing, multilateralism, and future of work. So you can see it's very diverse, and it's worth to tune in. And as we highlight at the end of each webinar, our discussion does not have to end here. Please share with us your feedback. Please stay with us in contact, browse through our videos on YouTube, re-listen to the today's online talk, discuss with us the discussion papers, or simply reach out. And last but not least, we are just about to launch our so-called Impact Lab, which is another exciting Geneva Macro Labs initiative with the aim to pilot a new impacting process that allows us to streamline our efforts of co-developing with you together impact projects that are not only supporting the SDGs, but are showcasing a new funding model. So if you would like to learn more about it, please connect with us. And last but not least, I wish you a great rest of the week. Thank you that you stayed longer than foreseen with us, and hopefully we will be able to welcome you to our upcoming events. Thank you so much. Stay well, and goodbye.